agenda under old business, middle and high school redistricting. Mr. Anderson.
And seems like a long time since we've talked about redistricting, right? It took me a little while to go back and immerse myself in the maps and charts and everything else. And so the purpose really tonight is just a review. Since we met last, which was mid-July actually, we have made some minor adjustments in the middle school plan, and I'm going to point those out to you. We have not made any changes in the high school plan. It's the same plan that was presented on the 18th, and tonight what we're really looking for is just consensus that this is what we want to carry forward to the public, and then we also want to look at the timeline. Obviously, we lost some time, and we need to make that up. So we have a couple of options for you to look at. So the guiding principles, that's the one thing that has not changed, and I always include them just for reference. There it is. This is the original timeline, and this is where we were in the process. We were in the public comment and public input phase. We were also sharing proposals and drafts with you and collecting input. Looking at that a little more closely. Again, this was the original timeline, but with some dates established. The BOE and public input session there was a meeting scheduled for September 11th, which was canceled, and then the redistricting forums. We had 3 of those that were scheduled in September. They were also canceled, and we were supposed to be here tonight approving the final plan. So as I mentioned, we have a couple of options for you to consider. There's 2. The first one I've highlighted in red where the changes are. The board meeting that was in September, we're providing that update for you tonight. And then in this particular one, we were condensing the public sessions to 2 and having board approval of the final plan in November. And then in option number 2, we go back to 3 public forums and also allow a little more time for board input and consideration with approval in January. This is really the latest we can approve this, because in February we're going to start working on student assignments, and Dr. Holliday will be sending those assignments out by the end of February. So these are the 2 options. I'd ask for your input on if you have any questions, or your input on which way you would like to go. Any questions about those?
And option number 1, go back to that screen, please. And why are you doing only 2 public forums instead of 3?
Just a compressed time, just a compressed amount of time.
Okay. So,
I will tell you, I will not be here for either one of those.
and I'm not sure that the families are ready to come out at that time either. I know that's a tight schedule, but
Right.
Are you available on the one with the 3 done by Ed?
Yes, yes. Oh, wait a minute, let me go back and look. Go back one more time. I need to go back to the 3. Go back to the next slide.
Option 2, Eddie.
Sorry.
Can you make any of those dates?
I will not be here on the 15th. I'll leave for Cuba on the 15th.
When is our board meeting?
Wednesday the 7th, I believe.
Yes, we moved to the 7th.
Right.
I would suggest that we do option 2. Just because it gives people a little bit more time. We get 3 public forums. And then, I don't think at this point, if we were to have final approval in January, I don't think it would surprise anyone, since we've now been talking about it for 15 months.
Right.
So I think everyone has an idea of what we're contemplating. And also, we'd be able to listen to the public forums, maybe have a redistricting committee or a redistricting meeting sometime in December with the board to talk about the public comments, and then have final board approval in January. That would make sense to me.
I agree with David. I think option 2, we will be making available that we are listening to the public because they don't want this rushed and they don't want it compressed. So I agree with David.
I think that's a wise choice. It does provide, more public input, but it also is going to give you more time to consider the comments. And what we could do here is actually schedule a work session in December. And I know with the holidays, it may be the second week in December, but we'll try to work that out with your schedules, and then have the final approval in January. And that may.
Mr. I know Ed's not going to be here on the 15th. I actually won't be available on the 15th too.
I won't either.
So maybe we can switch that one around, or
We can?
Where are y'all going on the 15th?
I'm going to Cuba.
I'll be at my state board meeting.
Does Wednesday, the 14th work better?
I can do the 14th.
All right, so Eddie, Wednesday, the 14th?
it'll work.
Yes.
All right.
That's good.
Wow, that was amazingly easy.
All right.
Can I get that in the form of a motion?
Okay, do I hear a motion that we adopt option 2 with the change being that the Minnie Evans Performance Arts Center would be Wednesday, November the 14th at 5:30?
I would actually have a substitute motion that we also add in between the redistricting and the final, a December work session.
Yep.
Okay.
With just TBA on the date.
Yeah, but just put it in
All right,
December.
okay, is that your motion?
That would be my motion, yes, sir.
I'll second that.
What is that motion
It's a
again?
that we, number 1, the Minnie Evans would be on November the 14th at 5:30, and that a redistricting work session would be scheduled for a date to be announced in December.
Second that.
I've got a motion, I've got a second. Any further discussion about that?
Are we
Yes.
we're including the fact that that we're working with option 2. So do you want to
Right,
include that,
yeah,
include that in the
yeah,
motion?
yeah.
My
Okay,
question,
call it option 2, yeah.
my question, would be, these, hearings, these will be recorded.
The
Right.
If that's
public
the board's
forums,
wish, yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to be here for these events. I'll be out of country. And I'm fine with option 2, because if I can watch the forums and learn from the forums, then I'm fine. But I just mentioned it for what it's worth. I agree with option 2 because it gives more time to the public to go to more events, have more discussion. It's just that I'm the exception to this rule.
Ms.
But-
Quattlebaum, can our folks able to tape those meetings? Okay.
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 Wait a minute, I might be
All right.
leaving too. Wait a minute, where you going?
I'm going to Europe.
Okay.
You going with it?
I might not be available.
You going with it?
Possibly.
Oh. All right, I have a motion, a second. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting option 2 with the modification signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is adopted.
Thank you. As I mentioned, we didn't make any changes to the high schools. So I'm just gonna review with you the changes that were made and presented at the July work session. And then there were only a couple of minor changes at the middle school, so I'll go over those with you in a little more detail. I've included all the maps, and if you have a specific question, I'll be glad to pull up one of the maps and answer those for you, but I won't go through the high school maps individually since we've already gone through those and we haven't proposed.
Well, I do have a question about the high school maps.
Okay.
I have one question. I've asked you, and I want to hear again why. I don't understand why the boundary line for New Hanover High School on Shipyard and Independence, why it's Independence and not Shipyard.
When we eliminated the Ashley satellite, we needed to recapture students for their capacity.
Well, my only thought was that, you know, it's one more opportunity those students already go to New Hanover. And it was just one more opportunity to move less students to a school that does not, we don't know what kind of growth New Hanover's going to have. We do presume that Ashley is going to continue to be one of, we've said the northern and southern schools are the fastest growing schools, that it will continue to grow and should probably make up any deficiency fairly quickly. So I'm just asking why we don't just move that line to Shipyard instead of it being at Independence.
Well, I think when you see the capacity comparisons, that'll help explain it.
Okay.
Ms. Davis has repeatedly stated that she would prefer her child to continue at New Hanover instead of being redistricted.
Well, I mean, can ask for that at a hearing. I mean, you know, if they're signed to Ashley and want us to go to New Hanover, but they'd have to provide transportation. I mean, if that's what the will of the board turns out to be. But I'm just asking that question because it seemed that Shipyard would make a much better demarcation line, and it would. I'm not Shipyard. I'm sorry. Not Shipyard is the demarcation. That Independence would make a much better demarcation line than.
We did look at that, and it's a significant number of students that would be moved.
It would reduce by about 50, I think, that would be moved. And again, our observation seems to be that not knowing what's going to happen at River Lights, you know, if that becomes really a lot of senior citizens, there may not be that many kids.
I think, and Mr. Higgins, I think the expectation for River Lights is exactly what you said. I know we've talked about having River Lights as an affluent neighborhood that will eventually provide students to New Hanover. But two thoughts, you know, first of all, eventually let's look at New Hanover now. Second of all, I mean, it's marketed as a retirement community. We understand that there's going to be some students there, but it's by no means going to be a community where is full of young families. That's just
Right.
not what it is. I mean,
That's my
it's not-
thought.
Yeah,
That-
it's
that
not
is
what
my
it is. I mean,
No.
Well, isn't there one section now that's for 55 and older?
a third of it already.
That's
Yeah, so I mean, it is a Del Webb community,
Yeah.
which is those familiar with those, the Sun Cities, they're a retirement community. So it's not this affluent neighborhood that people are telling, it's an affluent neighborhood. It's just not a neighborhood where we may get some students out of it, but it's not going to be this neighborhood where hundreds of students are coming out and going to New Hanover.
Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out for consideration.
Well, I agree with you, Mr. Higgins. I think if we can leave as many students where they are and create more the balance, then we need to do that. I mean, it doesn't make sense to move out kids than move kids in.
Yes, ma'am.
So, right. The other thing we've looked at New Hanover is, you know, the population that's at New Hanover, and I think that was probably a consideration when you were drawing those lines as well, too, correct?
Right.
Looking at the socioeconomic numbers at New Hanover, and I think moving the area that you moved to Ashley actually helps reduce the free reduced lunch, or we would anticipate it reducing the free reduced lunch numbers at New Hanover, correct?
And increasing it.
At Ashley, which is one of the 7
Yeah,
criteria
but
that we look
I'm
at.
not, I'm not sure how many people, this is that wedge between
No, I know-
Shipyard,
I-
yeah, and that's.
I know exactly where
that's
it
not-
is.
Yeah, and that's not, it's not a wealthy neighborhood, but it's not a poor neighborhood either. It's what my parents would lovingly call a working class neighborhood. Anyway.
So, looking at the public comments, this was prior to the hurricane, but we had 20 comments total. 7 of them were in favor of the proposal, and the remainder, a lot of them around junior-senior privilege, or 1 or 2 specific issues, not really any kind of trend where a lot of people were commenting on the same issue.
The recommendation for, from administration is to do the senior privilege, correct?
Traditionally, that's what's been done, yes.
Okay.
So just for review, and looking at the high school proposal, this is version 2 that was presented with these changes July 18th. The differences from version 1 to version 2 were really 3 things. We left the study areas 306, 307, and 308 at Ashley. This does move the district line between Ashley and Hoggard to Mohican Trail. That was one of the comments from the public. Leaving study area 218 at New Hanover, this moved the district line dividing Ashley and New Hanover to Shipyard Boulevard.
We actually did make that change.
Oh, did you? Okay. Oh,
And-
no, Shipyard Villa.
And then we added study areas to expand the Hoggard satellite.
Yeah, but we want the dividing line.
Any questions on the specific changes, or I'll go to the capacity comparison?
Have you gotten any comments since?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't checked since the storm. I'll be honest with you.
It's been a little busy.
We've been a little busy, and so we had the presentation prepared for September, and we rolled with it like it was.
It would have been on the back burner.
Oh, anything else?
Could I ask you a question that I'd
Yes,
just like
sir.
your professional opinion on? I have my opinion, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. That I've heard it said that what we should do is, with this redistricting, is that, say, a high school that's 9 through 12, that any students that we move, we should move only the incoming freshmen, meaning 9th graders. That's it. That's the only people it should affect. And I guess my first thought is just, how practical is that? I mean, that's just not, as far as transportation or in many other areas, it's just not.
Well, I mean, you would make the implementation a
you're talking about
4-year
growing.
process, and it's not going to help your middle schools at all, which is one of the primary reasons we're doing this.
Well,
And by
the
the
solution
time-
there was 6th, 7th, and 8th. You only start with the 6th graders. You only move 6th graders, period.
And the-
And only 9th graders on the high school level.
And
I think-
and kindergartners on the elementary.
Right?
Transportation challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
transportation nightmare, and
Yeah.
puts fixing any issues potentially out 6 years.
Well, it's like
You've heard
having,
this, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
it's like having a 9th grade center or whatever. It'd be
No, ma'am,
the
no.
reverse of that.
No, ma'am, I think what they're talking about is they're saying starting redistricting for only incoming 9th graders that actually go to the same high school. It's not a
Right.
9th grade center, but,
Right.
and then going forward from there, which would do
Like
what?
10th, 11th, and 12th would go there, but
Stay
it's the
there.
9th.
That would be a,
No, it's not
It's
feasible.
like having 4 teeth to pull and only pulling one.
It's like one year when you look
one
at,
each year.
well, one year the suggestion in subdivisions was to go back historically and see when that subdivision was set up. And the older ones that have been in existence for a while would continue at that school. The newer ones, even if they were right across the street from the school, they were the ones that would not go there.
That's
And I just simply said, can you imagine the transportation
That's kind of what
nightmare?
we did, that's what we did up in,
Ogden.
Ogden area, yeah. The new subdivisions went to Holly Shelter.
How's that worked out?
Satellites.
Well, you know, it worked out.
Satellites.
It has.
It worked out until.
It kept, it
That's
kept
a
on-
It was good for the first year. After that, not so good.
Nah, I know. One here, two there.
All right, the capacity comparisons, actually, I was showing you version 1 and version 2, so you can see what impact the changes made. And you can see that where Ashley is, all of the schools are over capacity. The average is about 110 students over capacity. And the reason why moving that district line from New Hanover and between New Hanover and Ashley down to Independence, it would move about 50 more students out of Ashley and into New Hanover. If that's the will of the board, it's not the end of the world. I think we have a plan that, it's a very good plan. If you want to make some minor changes to it, I mean, I think that's up to you. And it's not gonna change these numbers too
Well,
much.
I think again, I believe that in all our discussions, the thought is anybody we take out of Ashley's, it's going to kind of be like a tsunami. It's going to fill back in
I
fairly
would say
quickly.
I hear you, but I'll also tell you that the developers of River Lights are telling us that they're looking at 20% as their market for families, and 20% of over 3,000 homes is a significant number.
Well,
So while on a percentage basis it doesn't seem like a lot, I think over the long term, it will impact the schools. How much? I think at this point it is kind of a guess.
But I mean, although I won't be here to have any say in it, I could envision that if that happens, that there may be some redistricting to send part of River Lights to Ashley.
Well, it could be.
Possible.
Could be. We're trying to put together a plan where we minimize redistricting.
I understand, but we're a growing county, and
So this is the capacity comparison. The next one is the free and reduced comparison. I think the changes that we made probably had the largest impact in the free and reduced numbers, which is what we were trying to achieve with those changes. The average here in version 2 is about 34% free and reduced. So you can see a much tighter range between the schools and an average that's more reflective of our community.
Are we going to consider asking the county commissioners to develop an impact tax for developments? We've discussed that in the past, but we've never really done anything about it.
So-
With our new working relationship with the county commissioners, it might be time for us to approach something like that.
I think an impact tax, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't that require an actual commissioners would have to put that on a ballot for a vote.
It's either that or it would have to be authorized by a general statute. So it's either voter approval or legislature approval. I don't think the commissioners themselves could just approve it without one of those two things.
Would you repeat that, please?
I think either it's got to be approved by the voters on a ballot or the legislature would have to approve it.
So the county commissioners cannot do it themselves?
I don't believe so. I can double check that, but I don't believe the commissioners can just do it by
Would you
simple
please check
vote.
into that?
I will.
Why would you want to have an impact tax at this point?
Because taking into consideration when a very large development comes in and they can virtually fill a school by themselves, we would have to build a new school. And the funding would be easier if we had an impact tax than having to wait on the county commissioners to raise our construction allowances. It's like River Lights, whenever they came, they gave us 20 acres of land?
15.
15 acres of land. And an impact tax would be the equivalent of that, but in a different area of the county. And I would assume like the Sudbury Road area, the Blue Clay Road area, those are the places ready for expansion.
I would say that the contemplations of the past would be that if it were legal, which is currently not, a tax on a development to generate for schools is a showstopper for incentivizing someone to come. What's been done instead has been negotiations through planned developments to get those developments to donate land, which in the case of River Lights, I think they've donated or made available 15 acres, which may or may not be enough for what we want to do. But I think the current plan and the way it's moved forward has been more palatable to the county commissioners in their ability to attract business here. Anyway, that's my
Well, I mean,
2 cents.
for me, the problem is, in the grand scheme of things, land's cheap. I mean, you know, even giving us 15 acres, probably, if you figured it was $100,000 an acre, that's $1.5 million in land. But then we would be expected to put an $18 million school on top of that 1.5 million acres if we were building an elementary school. So, I mean, I understand the point. What would better serve the county, there is a provision, I believe, in the general statute, and I don't know whether the people of New Hanover County would approve it or not, but it is a provision for a school tax that can be specifically designated for capital construction, can be anything from 1 cent to 50 cents, that the voters would have to approve in a referendum. And, you know, you put a sunset provision on it, which would help maybe avoid some of the cost of building schools, because then you don't have to issue bonds, so you don't end up paying, you know, $30 million for a $15 million school.
Well, guys,
But that's, I realize, that's a
I want to get you back on,
yeah.
on this subject.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, middle school redistricting, I have labeled this version 3 since we did make some minor changes. Comments, we had received 161 comments. The majority of those were from neighborhoods moving from Noble to Holly Shelter. You can see the other comments that are listed. The one that I would say that we do need to take a look at, Terran Woods is expanding, and we need to take a look at that, and so that we don't split that neighborhood. I think that you know, it's proposed right now that the current or existing homes would be in Ashley, but perhaps the future expansion, not in Ashley, in Murray, and future expansion into Myrtle Grove. So we will take a look at that.
Is that south of Century Oaks?
It is.
Okay.
Where's Century?
It's right behind Battle Park.
Grove Road.
Behind where?
Battle Park.
Oh, okay.
And where are they being sent to?
I'm sorry, what?
Where are they being sent to?
Well,
If Century Oaks has a problem, what is the problem?
well, Century Oaks doesn't have a problem. It's Terran Woods. The current proposal has Terran Woods going to Murrayville.
Murray.
I cannot get Murray right. I cannot say Murray. And I believe that their future phase is in the Myrtle Grove district. So that's an area we want to take a look at. Make sure that we don't split Terran Woods.
We'll show you to that when we get to that one on the map.
So the revisions that were included in version 3 tonight, just a summary of those changes. We were leaving the those study areas in the Noble district. That's the Wendover, Emerald Forest neighborhoods. There's some minor shifts in district lines between Noble, Williston, and Roland Grice in return to push the, or to increase the, reduce the projected membership at Noble. And we were also proposing a satellite for the Noble district and expanding the Myrtle Grove satellite. These are the two maps side by side for your comparison. The total number of students moved, 621, which is 11.5%. Looking at the moves individually, there was no change in the move of students proposed from Murray to Myrtle Grove. It's 45 students. That was version 3 is consistent with versions 1 and 2.
So Eddie, looking at this map, which one of these is the Taryn Wood area? Is it 317?
What's that? 3.
The neighborhood you were concerned about, is it study area 317?
No, it's on a different one.
Okay.
It's not on this one. So this is the road. This is the neighborhoods or homes directly across from Myrtle Grove on the south side of Piner Road. There's no change in this proposed move from Roland Grice to Myrtle Grove. This is the Lansdowne neighborhood. Again, no change from versions 1 or 2. The proposed change from Roland Grice to Williston. This is the neighborhood between Riceville Beach, Oleander, around the Winter Park School. No change again from version 1 or 2. This is Trask to Holly Shelter. This is currently a satellite for Trask and is the Marsh Oaks neighborhood. There was no change from version 2 in this move. This is the Bayshore neighborhood. So the dividing line would be between Wendover and Emerald Forest and Bayshore neighborhood. So Bayshore would be moving to Holly Shelter. No change from version 2, moving students from Noble to Williston. This is in the area south of Eastwood, including College Acres. We did have a change in the Trask, proposed district for Trask. This leaves the homes along Torchwood Road, those neighborhoods that are currently in Holly Shelter. It leaves them in the Holly Shelter district, and we picked up some areas closer to Trask, proposing to move them from Holly Shelter into Trask. That's a total of 30 students. Williston to Noble. This leaves study areas 184 and 185 that were included in this. We deleted them. Those are two study areas that were actually not even shown on this map. They were further south along Wrightsville Avenue. So we reduced the number of students from Williston to Noble to 63. The next two slides are where we were expanding the satellites for Myrtle Grove and Roland Grice. So I'll go through them individually, but really when you're looking at this and reviewing it, look at them together. The first one, we reduced the Myrtle Grove satellite, study areas 190 and 193. We took those out of the satellite, but we're going to, in the next slide, put them into Roland Grice. And this is we added study areas 277, 278, and 278A from Myrtle Grove to Roland Grice. Again, these are the ones that, sorry, did I get a? Yeah.
I can't tell what's on this map and what isn't. It's so small. Are you talking about the areas that are surrounded in green?
Two, you've got three here and then
Right.
two up there.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's hard to see because the highlighted area is in blue and we've outlined the affected study areas in blue. It's hard to see on these, but this has a point.
In previous times, the board members were each given a copy of the large maps that y'all draw up for our own benefit so that we could
You have an
really tell
electronic
what's
version
going
of
on.
this, you can blow it up, but if you'd like a hard copy, I'll be glad to get you one.
One like this?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And Williston to Roland Grice, these were study areas added to expand the Roland Grice satellite. And then Williston to Holly Shelter, there was no change from version 1 and version 2 on those.
Mr. Anderson, do we have a fixed number of how many, that last slide that we were on? Originally, I thought we had anticipated about half of those students actually going to
I've
Holly
actually
Shelter?
reduced that in the capacity comparison. We reduced that by 100
Okay,
after
so
getting.
that one should be 42 instead of
It'll
142?
be,
Somewhere in
this
that area,
is,
50.
right.
It's, on your next slide, it's factored into the next one.
Okay, this one right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the capacity calculation, I've got a note there that the Holly Shelter membership is reduced by approximately, 100 that attend DC Virgo. So again, in looking at the comparison between versions 1, 2, and 3, again, I think that each one of these small changes made a difference. While we're over capacity in our middle schools, we're at an average of 121. So comparing that to these numbers, you see we're very close, which means the range is not that. It's only 63 actually.
So which version are y'all recommending?
Three.
Three. Okay, I just want to be clear.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes,
why
sir.
did we so substantially reduce the capacities of almost 10% at Trask?
The enrollment,
Yeah, because that one is, 40 students lower than any other school that we have, which is pretty substantial. 40 students is 5%. If you have a school of
well,
800 students.
when
Was there a
we
reason
moved
for
those-
that?
when we moved the neighborhoods along Torchwood out of Trask and put in the neighborhoods that were closer, there were very few students in those neighborhoods.
Well, you moved one group of students from Trask to Holly Shelter, and I think they were currently going to Holly Shelter, but they looked like they were in about a half a mile from Trask. And I'm just questioning, was there a thought process in terms of having Trask's enrollment so
No.
much less than everyone else, or did it just happen to end up like that?
That's how it ended up. We can look at moving the Torchwood.
I was just wondering, because, it
There
just
was-
jumped out as
yeah.
substantially different.
Yeah, there was no, that wasn't intentional, that it ended up as low as it is.
And I don't know if there's again,
It's something we can look at as we go through, see what the comments say as it relates to that, and when we come back to that final approval.
if there's, some way to,
Well, the other thing too is, again, Holly Shelter and Trask. Holly Shelter is 128, will be 128 over capacity, over 1,000 students.
which is where your growth is gonna go.
That's what I'm
to Holly
saying, yeah.
Shelters.
It'd be
So that's why I
seen-
was wondering why
I
we
would
did
agree
that.
with you that, less students in Holly Shelter, because if they start building out Blue Clay Road and,
Ogden. That's
Ogden,
where,
up in,
Marsh
you know,
Oaks
up
there.
up on Holly Shelter Road too. There's a lot of wooded land up there. If they start building out up there, next thing you're gonna know, you're gonna have 1,200 students at Holly Shelter. And,
We're gonna need 3 new schools.
It's the
well,
next
you
thing
need,
to
I see, you
understand.
need a new middle school anyway.
Yes, we do,
Well, but
There's-
are
right now.
Are there active plans to do that?
to build a new school.
No, are there building plans underway at Holly Shelter? I mean, the only, you know, I'm not that familiar with that part of the county.
I would say,
get lost up there.
probably, you know, before the recession, Castle Hayne, I thought was really poised to grow. They had done completed a study and put together a growth plan that was really nice. I have a copy of it, and it was very well thought out. I think at this point, probably the area, the last frontier, so to speak, in New Hanover County is probably, you know, that Sidbury Road
It's
area.
the only area that has enough room to expand.
And I
But
think
currently, there's no water and sewer, and that's the,
It's gonna
That's
take
sort
a
of the
large
gatekeeper right
development,
And then
you
you
know,
have
like
an-
River Lights to, you know, to come in there and spark that because, and Dr. Markley mentions the water and sewer. not
Just, if
available.
we're looking, if we are gonna do this and we're gonna look forward, I think that is something that we need to look at to plan. I mean, the way that you have maybe Ashley, you've anticipated some growth coming, high school growth coming into Ashley. I think we need to do the same for Holly Shelter.
Okay.
Just my thought.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I don't disagree. You know, and again, we could look at that, you know, the Torchwood Road area was originally proposed to be in Trask, and I think that would boost their numbers up a little bit, make them, you know, more comparable to the other schools and reduce Holly Shelter. The free and reduced comparisons, again, it's, you know, I think version 3 really did what, you know, what the changes were intended to do. It brought those, you know, it brought those schools, you know, closer together. We have a range of 24%, and the average is, you know, 40.73.
It's not me.
no, if it's quacking, it's Dawn's.
We're gonna have this available for you. You know, we're gonna, it's already on our website. If you'd
Can I
like
ask
to
a
make.
couple questions about that prior slide, if you don't mind? Sorry about that. I'll be brief. Looking at these numbers, and I appreciate what we've done, and we've tried to address the overcrowding, which we haven't really addressed the overcrowding a lot, especially in some of our middle schools. If you look what we've done at Noble, I think we've only reduced them by what the current amount is. 8. Well, I guess its capacity is, so we've reduced it by 70, I think, current capacities. But we're looking at the overcrowding, but are you satisfied with what we've done to our highest population for free and reduced, whether it be Williston, whether it be Holly Shelter? I mean, just looking at the numbers that you have proposed up here, we haven't changed it at all at Noble. We haven't changed it at all at Murray. We've nominally changed it at Roland Grice, increasing by about 5%. Williston is still extremely high. Holly Shelter is still extremely high, although I would hope with the building growth it may come down in anticipation of it. But it doesn't seem like we've really done anything with, we've done very little with the free and reduced numbers. And I don't know, when y'all looked at, when you did the maps, and I appreciate all the work that y'all have done doing that, but it just seems like we can do a lot more.
I would echo what Mr. Wortman is saying. I feel like with all the tweaking that we've done, some of the things that we were trying to do at the beginning, we've now circled back around and we've undone some of that work. You know, we started out trying to reduce some of the overcrowding at Noble and changing that socioeconomic balance, and that's the one that's it's basically the same. I mean, we've changed it a little bit, but we really haven't done as much as we haven't done much. And then Williston, we've changed some, but not very much. And to do all this work and to go through all this pain for just a little bit of gain doesn't really seem worth it. So I guess I question. I'm not questioning what you've done. I just feel like maybe we've tweaked this and tweaked this to try to make everybody happy, and so we've tweaked it to the point of you know, breaking it.
Well, I think you're exactly right, and that's what we are doing. We're tweaking it, and consequently, you're not going to see those big changes. You know, if you want to see big changes, I really think you were going to have to start over. You know, we go back to version one.
Well, you
I
also
mean,
gonna
it's,
have to.
the changes that we've made from version 1 to version 2 to version 3 have been minimal.
Well, I think though, if you're gonna severely reduce free and reduced lunch at Williston and Holly Shelter, you're gonna have to bus kids from downtown and from Holly Shelter to, Noble or, you know,
We're already moving kids from downtown to the Myrtle Grove satellite.
some, yeah, I
And
mean,
I just think that, you know, we have a,
we may do more.
we have 7 middle schools that we're responsible for. If you look at the socioeconomic figures, if you look at the success of some of our middle schools as opposed to the failures of some of our middle schools, I think that we have the responsibility, if we're going to do this, and consider all 7 of our
Guiding principles.
guiding principles. I think that I'll be honest, we're leaving 2 schools behind. We're leaving Williston and Holly Shelter behind. And Williston has, has great history in this city. There are people that are extremely proud of Williston, but I think we owe it to those people to try to come up with something to help it succeed. And looking at these numbers, I feel like we're helping Noble, we're helping Roland Grice and Murray, and they're all about the same, and we're leaving that one behind. That's just my thought. And maybe it's a different discussion that we need to have as to what we can do at Williston to get some
Yeah,
good
I'm
ideas.
open to any ideas.
Folks, I would tell you, Holly Shelter, even at 57%, has a school grade of a B.
As a school what?
Has a school grade from the state accountability of a B.
B or G?
B as in
B as in
best.
boy.
More specifically, I'm speaking
Sure.
about Williston.
And I think that we've already put in basically 3 satellites out of the Williston district in this plan to take students and reduce that number down. I think at this point, we have to look at programming.
And that is something that we need to do, but I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle. That we say that we're gonna do something, we're gonna redistrict, and then we say, we'll look at something later, and then later turns into years, and we get into the same situation where we've been with this middle school for years.
Excuse me, what did you say? I didn't hear the second part. Programs?
I think we need to be looking at programs.
Okay.
I mean, and looking at Williston, their performance over the last 2 years has gone up each year. And that sort of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. But I think there are some things that we can do programmatically at that school that will help them as well. We can put in specialty programs there around, example, coding. There's some immersion programs around computer coding and robotics that would be something that's different and not offered anyplace else that we could look at that school. We've talked about IB at Hoggard creating a pre-IB program at one of our middle schools to create a pathway. And that's something that we can look at there as well.
I would also like to talk to the city about safety.
Yep.
I think one of the big, your perception is reality. And we look at some of the events that happen in that neighborhood, and it's no reflection on the school, but those events are associated with the school because of how close they are. So I would like to also bring the city in and talk about what they can do to make sure that, that we have an area that kids can learn in.
So if we're gonna do that, if we're gonna look into doing like a coding or a pre-IB program there, I think then we also have to, we need to get on the fast horse with that, because then we would have to leave some space at Williston for those students. Rather than, and again, that would mean, keeping their capacity a little bit lower to assume that those students would be going. So that would factor into this discussion. So we would have to have those plans a little bit firmed up before we finish this, because if they're over capacity and they're over capacity 110, and then you add those students, assuming they would want to go, that would put that school even more overcrowded.
So maybe we can use that space at Trask, maybe kind of split that space up, Dr. Markley, between possibly Holly Shelter and Williston if possible.
We can take a look at it, and, I think time-wise, you've got your November ones. We can bring back some adjustments at the November board meeting to give you a look at.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Do we plan on having the large maps available for the public to
Yes.
view at the, okay, good.
All right, so if I'm hearing this, we're gonna make some adjustments based on some feedback, show you some maps at the November meeting, and those are the maps that we'll take to the public forum
As possibilities.
as possibilities.
Right,
Correct.
right. All right, any other questions? I think that's it.
Anybody have any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is new business, 2018, 2019 Alternative School Accountability Model. Dr. Smith.
Yes, would ask the board's approval of the Alternative Schools Accountability Model for Lake Forest Academy, Mosley, and J.C. Rowe School. Each year, the district brings before the board several options and a recommendation for the accountability models for our alternative schools. This year, we are recommending option B, which allows for us to determine the school performance grade for our alternative schools by looking at 3 years of data, the progress that students are making, and then also considering the growth performance of the school over that time period. So would ask the board's approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
Did you say second?
I did.
Okay. Any questions or discussion?
What was the option we chose last year?
Option B as well.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It is approved. Next item, public
Thank you.
consult, I'm sorry. No. Public Consulting Group for the fiscal year 2018-19 school year, Appendix I. Ms. Askew.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask the board's approval for this contract with Public Consulting Group for the housing and database for all of our individualized education programs, in addition to our Medicaid administrative claiming services, which would be our service logs and our billing source.
Hear a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Who are you using now?
It's a renewal contract. We've been working with Public Consulting Group for several years, and PCG. They now have the state contract to provide us this system that will be much less cost for us after this school year. So they hold the state contract now as well.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Next
Thank you.
item, New Hanover County Sheriff's Department contract, Appendix J. Dr. Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, I ask that you approve this contract. We received this money from a grant from the state that allows us to continue to have our officers in our elementary schools. So I ask that you approve this. Like I said, the money is coming from a grant from the state.
Have a motion, or hear a second? Got a second? Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Next item, North Carolina Works Career Coach Program Memorandum of Understanding, Appendix K. Dr. Smith.
Yes, would have asked for the board's approval of this memorandum of understanding with Cape Fear Community College. There is an addendum that was offered by Mr. Bullard, adding some additional language to this that we are going to share with the community college as well. This allows the community college to work with our students in our schools and provide them with some additional coaching career coaching in regards to attending Cape Fear Community College.
That addendum is coming down, and I'll ask Mr. Bullard to explain the addendum.
The addendum is in front of you, I believe, and I've added three things. One is the Jessica Lunsford Clause Act, which we're required by law to insert in contracts like this when our partner is putting their employees in direct contact with our students. It basically says that they have to do a search of the sex offender registry for all of those people, and they will prevent any such person from having direct interaction with our students. It also adds a clause that says that any student information that the community college receives, that these career coaches may receive from us, they will hold in confidence in compliance with the FERPA law. And then finally, I added a clause that said the community college will maintain adequate liability insurance for us to protect us in the event that one of their career coaches does something that gets us into a legal issue.
Do you anticipate any resistance on these
No,
adjustments?
these are pretty standard clauses, and we've not had any issue with any of our local partners in agreeing to these type clauses in the past.
We did have problems one time with the university was questioning the number one.
Yeah,
but-
years ago we did, but since then we've worked it out.
Good, good. All right. Do I hear a motion that we
moved.
accept it with the addendum?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion?
I just want to say that I'm really glad that the career coaches are coming on board here in this county. Several counties have them, and I think that on the state board, I've heard nothing but positive things. So I think they'll be a big help to our students.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Item E, 2019-20 and 2020-21 fiscal year certification with Cape Fear Community College, Appendix L. Dr. Smith.
Yes, this item is also related to the previous one, and this is documentation that the community college needs signed in order for them to pursue the monies to fund those positions for the career coaches. So would I ask your approval?
Move for approval.
Have a motion, need a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item F, disposal of surplus property, I guess is no longer needed or necessary type language. Ms. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do request the board's approval to dispose of the surplus items that are listed and no longer necessary or desirable for public school purposes. We have an auction scheduled pending board approval on November 3rd at 10 o'clock. I did also want to mention that you got an updated version of this last evening that added some chairs at Sidbury Road that College Park that initially we have been told because they were damaged during the storm, we would have to dispose of them. Since then, the chairs have been cleaned, and we are awaiting an updated environmental analysis. We've already had one. We're going to have another one. If we're able to keep them, we will, but I think it's probably a slight chance that we'll be allowed to keep them. If we can't keep them, I wanted to go ahead and get your approval to dispose of them. So, kind of a long story, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew if there's any way that we can save those chairs, we will. But the plan right now is for your approval if we need to sell them.
Can you tell us the email that we got from somebody in the community talking about selling of surplus items without prior approval from the administration?
Yeah,
That's what she's talking about.
typically what happens is the vendor that we work with will advertise items, and it will say pending board approval. And we, since that was discovered, we have said that they should not do that until the board has approved the items. Okay. So I think the idea was to get as much advertising as possible so that you get more funding. But we want to make sure it doesn't look like we're jumping ahead of the proper process. So for now, we will not allow them to advertise anything that you have not approved.
But they were selling them individually, weren't they? Like,
Say again?
they were gonna, the advertisement that I saw was like, if you want one, $20 and it's yours. I mean, did they sell a bunch of them already?
None have been sold. They're all stored in our warehouse
Yeah, that's
under
what
our
somebody-
control.
Somebody
I
sent us,
I got the email, but I didn't see they were selling them individually.
$20 a
Yeah.
piece.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
There was some confusion, I think, about whatever was posted, but the chairs were moved by our staff. The auctioneer was involved because they helped with the trucks because our staff was so busy that day. They helped transport them, but they're secured in a separate area from the other surplus in case we decide not to sell them.
Because I was asked about it, and I said, well, I don't really know because the board should, approve that.
Absolutely.
Being surplus before they're being sold like that. So that's why.
But now it's been handled, so.
I make a motion for approval.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion?
You've heard the word environmental consultant a couple of times tonight. I would just ask Eddie to explain what that is and who that is, the company.
The environmental consultant?
Yeah.
Well, each one of our teams, Jarvis and WM Jordan and Monteith have a environmental consultant on board, as well as we have hired our own environmental consultant, so that we're making sure that what their consultant is recommending as far as what to throw away and what not to throw away, we have someone that's confirming that. So the question with the chairs really is surrounding whether or not they were inspected adequately, and now that they've gotten out and they've been cleaned, they're going to look at them again.
But I want you to know that that environmental consultant is not an in-house person, but it's a third party that we've hired to double-check our work and the work of our contractors.
Good.
Right, and that provides consistency among the different contractors in the work we're doing. So that's why we hired that third person as a double check and to provide that consistency.
Thank you. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Item G, budget amendment number 2, Appendix N. Ms. Small.
Thank you. We discussed this a little bit earlier tonight in the hurricane update, but this is to appropriate additional funds for repairs and content replacement. We're requesting an additional $2 million from fund balance appropriation, bringing the total for the storm to 6, and then $3 million in anticipated insurance and FEMA proceeds. So then the total budget currently related to storm recovery would be at $9 million.
Do I hear a motion?
so moved.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll
I have a
second.
second. Any questions or discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
When we approved the change from 1 million, well, we approved $1 million, then we approved 3 for a total of 4.
Yes, sir.
And I asked the question at that meeting, I don't believe you were in attendance, but the question was, with the background that fund balance is not just out of cash. Fund balance is a formula that has cash in it.
Right.
And so, from your perspective, if we move in this direction, and the reimbursements don't come in, do you have sufficient funding to operate from the standpoint of working capital?
Yes, I mean, the main reason this is one of the main reasons we have fund balances for this very thing. And this is lower than we want to see it. This will take us to 2.3% or 3.2%, whatever's in the earlier presentation. I can't remember the percentage, but $9.5 million. But so we're at a lower percentage of our budget, but that will give us, ample cash flow. We might have to ask for reimbursements a little more often from the county, as we go through the year, but we should be fine. And we really anticipate insurance being much more than the $3 million. We just don't know how long it'll take. I think we said earlier it could be more than a year to get some of that back. So we didn't want to be, we didn't want to budget too much out of insurance at this point, because we are afraid we might go into the next fiscal year before we get some of that back, and I wanted y'all to have a truer picture of the impact of fund balance. So does that help? Okay.
I understand the 4 and the 2, but the 3 in anticipated insurance,
Right.
how does that work with, you're gonna spend it before we receive it, is that what we're saying?
Well, basically, you know, with all money we budget anticipated revenue, anticipated expenditures. So what we're saying is we expect to receive this year that at least $3 million, hopefully more, in reimbursements to offset these expenditures. So does that?
And
does
then
that
a
make
lot more later after time passes.
And if we get
to
more
recoup
later,
what we're putting out.
then that will reimburse and will allow us to build the fund balance back up.
Right.
Any other questions?
Is there a motion on the floor?
There is a motion and a second. If there's no more questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. All right, next item on the agenda is correspondence. Anybody got any correspondence they want to share? I would like to share one piece of, it's not actually correspondence. I was at the State School Board Association Legislative Committee meeting yesterday, in which they are establishing the legislative agenda for the state school board for the coming 2 years. A couple of things that I gleaned out of that I wanted to share with this group. Number one, the anticipation is that the Republicans are going to lose the veto-proof majority, that there will be Democrats elected, and they'll still have a majority, but they won't be veto-proof. But a couple of things. Number one, I was kind of disappointed to find out that at least 2 of the board members on this board did not bother to answer the survey. We had 5 or 7 to answer the survey. I think 12 counties had everybody to answer their survey. But a couple of things that are probably going to be on the agenda for the state school board. Number one, obviously, is the bond issue for school construction. Number 2 is, I did not realize, but apparently the state legislature has made some inroads in the 40% of the lottery money that they're supposed to be providing for school construction. They are apparently working towards doing something on that. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Maybe Mary Hazel knows.
I haven't heard an update yet.
Well, that's because that was one of the things they took off the agenda because they said the legislature was moving towards it. Now, the other thing, Mary Hazel, you'll be happy maybe to hear this, and you too. Apparently, there is a move afoot to make financial officers like any other employee of the state of North Carolina, the school system, and therefore you would no longer be an employee at will. You would have a contract like the rest of this crowd has, and so I don't know if that's going to come into being, but that is going to probably be on the agenda because apparently it takes state legislative action for that to happen. But that is an agenda. And, of course, pay raises for principals and teachers. Principal pay raises would be based on their years as a principal, not their years in education. So those are the major things that were discussed and brought forth. All right. Announcements. Next regular meeting of New Hanover County Board of Education is scheduled for Wednesday. Want that noted, it is Wednesday, November the 7th, 2018 at 5:30 here in the BOE Center. Anything else I need to announce?
No.
Hearing nothing, do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Question.